Okay, so here we are with our factoring of our polynomials. Your first question was to state the common factor and then go ahead and factor it out. So what did the 4x cubed plus 2x squared minus 6x all have in common? 2x. So when you take that 2x out, essentially what are we doing? We are dividing it out. Remember, greatest common factor is pretty much the opposite of distributing, right? You're going to have something now on the outside. So what did that leave you with? So the 4x cubed divided by the 2x is 2x squared. The 2x squared divided by the 2x. And the minus 6x divided by the 2x. Okay. That it? Okay. All right, so now, when we move on to question 2, so they asked you how many terms does it have? Well, you have this plus sign and you have this plus sign. So separating how many terms? 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so this essentially has 3 terms. What do they all have in common? They all have the x minus 3. Here, here, and here. So essentially, can I treat this problem the exact same way we treated the first one? Can we? So what am I going to factor out then on this one? I'm going to factor that out, exactly. So let's do that. So if I factor out the x minus 3, whoops. What do I have left? So if I factor x minus 3 out of my first term, what do I have left? X squared. Plus, if I factored this x minus 3 out of my second term, what do I have left? 2x. And my third one, if I factor out my x minus 3 here, what do I have left? 3. Okay? A little odd, right? But it's okay. Right? We're going to do this when we do our grouping. So you're fixing to see this here in a minute, and that's okay. Okay, so to factor this 2x squared plus 7x minus 4, what I want you to do is I want you to try to factor this using your x method. Or we're not going to try to, we're going to set it up using our x method. Let me restate that. All right, so set it up. What's going to go on top?
A times c.
Which would be what? What's in negative 8? Okay. Use that color. Color we don't have. Okay, what goes in the bottom? 7. All right. So what are your 2 factors that need to go in on the side? What do we have that goes in on either side? 8 and negative 1. Yes. Okay. Now, the way we did it in the previous chapter, we went and put those into our 2 binomials, right? We're going to do this a little bit different. So now what we're going to do is we are going to put x's with our factors, and we're going to rewrite the equation. So we're going to rewrite that as 2x squared plus 8x minus the 1x minus the 4. All right, now the next thing we're going to do is we are going to group the first 2 terms together, separate from the last 2 terms. So I'm going to go ahead. So I don't want to multiply them, so I'm going to go ahead and put a plus in between them and move that minus sign in between that x minus 4. So I just went ahead and I wanted to go ahead and group those together, so I just moved my negative and added a plus in there in between them, plus the negative. It's still there. All right, so you have a 2x squared plus an 8x. A 2x squared plus an 8x. What can you factor out of that?
Okay.
2x. All right, what would that leave you with in the parentheses? X plus what? 4. Okay. And now we're going to do the other one. So plus, what can we factor out of a negative x minus 4?
Wait, you factored it again?
Negative 1. Okay. And what would that leave us with inside? X plus 4. Okay, now what do you see? So x plus 4 is now our what? Yes. Now you have a greatest common factor. So what are you going to factor out now?
X plus 4.
X plus 4 goes out. And then what stays in? So what's left over? What's left over here? 2x. And over here, yes, thank you, the minus 1. So here it is. Okay, a little different, right?
So you factored it twice, so after you rewrote it, you factored it again?
Yeah, so instead of what we had done before, because sometimes our X method didn't work, so we can, this is another way, if it's not going to work for us, we could draw back on this method as well. Okay, and that would be to, instead of bringing those together or putting them in those two binomials and factoring out the other way. Okay? It's a little different method, another way to approach it.
Okay, I see.
All right, so we have an x cubed plus an x squared plus a 2x plus a 2. I'm going to have you split them up, kind of like what we just got finished doing. This time we just already have our 4 terms in place. All right, you have an x cubed plus an x squared. Factor that one. Factor the x cubed plus the x squared. Factor your 2x plus 2. Take out the square. Okay, do you have a common factor after you do that? Yes, what's your common factor?
X plus 1.
So now what are you going to do?
Rewrite it.
How are you going to rewrite it?
One part's going to be the factor part, the other's going to be the...
Exactly. So your factor, your greatest common factor, that'll come out. Right? So we'll bring him out. What do you have left in your first set? Yeah, x squared. And what are you going to have left in your second set?
2.
Plus 2. Okay. So this is where our cubes, our powers of 3 and powers of 4 are going to start coming into play here. Those others were those little quadratics. Okay, so here's what you notice. If you're given a polynomial that looks like this, you have an x cubed plus, minus a 9x squared plus a 4x minus a 6. What you notice is how many terms does it have? 4. It has 4 terms, okay? Well, in order to group or use grouping, you have to have 4 terms. So you're going to take a look at this and you're going to decide if, in fact, I can group. I can do grouping. So if you look at your first 2 terms, so do they have a greatest common factor?
Yes.
And then look at the last 2 terms. Do they have a greatest common factor? Okay, so factor this one out for me. To split it up. Okay. What did that leave you with? Leave you 2x minus 3?
Yes.
All right, what did you have with the 4x minus 6? 2. And we factored that out. We're left with 2x minus 3. Now what can you do? Do you have a greatest common factor now? What's your next step? Take out that 2x minus 2. What's that going to leave you with? Or 2x minus 3, I think I said 2. That will leave you with the 3x squared and plus the 2. Okay? Any questions on that? Just one thing I want to...
get 2x minus 3?
Okay, so if you take this 2 out, you're left here with a 2x minus 3. So put your parentheses. One thing I want to point out, if you have a grouping of 4 and you try to group them and factor them, and you do not end up with, in this case, a 2x minus 3, you may have to rework some of your terms or your terms to see if maybe, in fact, you need to do a little bit of rearranging in order for it to work. So sometimes that will pop up. Okay. You have an x cubed. You have an x cubed. So what did you cube to get an x cubed?
X.
X. Very good. All right. Our b. Our b is an 8. What did you cube to get the 8? What goes here?
Negative 2.
Just 2. The minus is just the minus 2. Okay? So you establish that first. Okay? Now you're going to put it in. Now you're going to put those in. So what's going to go here? X. Remember the minus is part of the formula. What's going to go in here?
8. Oh, 2.
So a squared is really x squared. So your a times your b.
2x.
Is it plus or minus?
Plus.
What's your formula tell you? What did you tell me? 2x? So what's going to go here?
2.
What is your 4? All right, so the first thing they did was they took that greatest common factor. So we had factored out the 2x. But notice, going from this step to this step, the 2x I still see, but now what did they do to this right here? Yeah, but how did they separate? They did something. What was the method behind their madness? They did something. What was it? Did they do the x method? Can we use the x method on this one?
Did they do the x thingy?
Did they do the x thingy? Good. Decide. Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. So they factored that, didn't they? Okay.
Oh.
So it looks a little odd. Why does it look a little odd to you? Because, and you need to get familiar with, they went from an x to the 4th. We really didn't do a lot of those, right? But the x to the 4th can be broken down into x squared and x squared, right? Because what happens if you multiply an x squared times an x squared? You get the x fourth back. So you'll see that. If you have time, I'll show you one real quick. All right. So now, well, gosh, what did they do now? It's like they're not stopping, are they? So now I still see the 2x. I still see the x squared plus 4. But now what did they do? Yeah, then they not fool, but didn't they factor that one again? They factor that one again? So they just kept, somebody asked me a second ago, do I need to keep factoring? So yeah, sometimes you do. Sometimes we keep factoring. So look what they did. They factored into this little trinomial here. Then they took that trinomial and factored it here. And then they took this guy and factored him again into a difference of 2 squares. Okay? And sometimes you keep going and keep going and keep going until you cannot go any further. What did we start with? What is the degree of this original polynomial?
5.
5. So what does that mean about possible zeros?
There's 5
How many possible zeros?
5.
Okay, so what does that mean about factoring? You're going to be doing a lot of factoring to get 5 zeros, right? So sometimes we have to keep pressing on until we get what we need. Okay, if we're up at a 5 for a degree, we're going to do a lot of factoring. Okay. Okay, so with four terms, you should have decided to group it. See if it worked for you.
Oh, that was a 2x squared, so I could have got rid of that.
So you had an x squared and you had a negative 1.
Yeah.
All right, is that what you got?
How'd the term positive?
Now, because you factored out the negative 1.
Yeah.
Do you have to, and here's another good point. If you didn't factor out that negative 1, you would not get the positive 2 or the plus 2. Remember, those have to match. Okay, so then you finished your factoring. Okay, now, did you stop at that point?
Yes.
Should you have stopped at that point?
No.
No. What do you still need to do?
Factor out the x plus 2.
No, the x plus 2 is if you have a power of 1, you're done. What do we have to do over here with this x squared minus 1? That still needs to be what? This still needs to be factored. You're not done. You still have, this is still a quadratic, right? Quadratics have 2 solutions. You need to keep going. Finish this up, what do you get?
How did you get?
Oh.